When was the last time you really thought about the land you occupy? The very ground beneath your feet. It holds stories. Stories whispered in the wind, etched in the rocks, and sometimes brutally buried. Today we're unearthing one of those stories, a story that resonates with the echoes of our past and the troubling echoes of our present. Today we hear talk of borders, of ownership, of taking what isn't ours. We hear echoes of a mindset that disregards the lives and cultures already thriving on the land. A mindset that reduces people to pawns in a power game. Think of the indigenous peoples who called this land home long before any European settlers arrived. Thousands of tribes, hundreds of languages, vibrant cultures. Then came the ships. And with them, a clash of worlds. Fear, misunderstanding, and a hunger for dominance fueled the colonization of the New World. The native people who offered help and shared their knowledge were met with disease, violence, and theft of their very lives. Today, we delve into the story of one of these people, a young woman named Pocahontas. Her story is far more complex, far more tragic than the sanitized version we've been told. We'll explore the land she knew, the world she inhabited, her initial friendship with the settlers, her devastating kidnapping, her forced transformation into a spectacle in England, and her untimely death far from home. And I will shed light on how a very modern issue is connected to her legacy, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Crisis, MMIP. This is Pocahontas' real story. This is HerStance. Let's dig in. Born Amanute around 1596, she was known to her people as Pocahontas, the playful one. And playful she was. Imagine a spirited young girl, the favorite daughter of Wahunaseneca, the powerful chief of Powhatan. Her world was the lush landscape of the Chesapeake Bay, a world of vibrant life and deep traditions. As a young Powhatan girl, she likely ran barefoot through the forests and fields, her skin kissed by the sun. Her head would have been shaved, save for a long braided section at the back, a common practice among her people. Can you picture it? The shaven parts likely bristly from the mussel shells used for shaving. In the colder months, if her family was fortunate, she might have worn a deerskin mantle. Now, even as the chief's favorite daughter, enjoying a more privileged life and greater protection, Pocahontas would have learned the skills and responsibilities of a Powhatan woman. Her playful spirit was nurtured, but she was also being prepared for the important role she would play in her community. As Pocahontas blossomed into a young woman, she would have embraced the vital roles and responsibilities of Powhatan women. Their work, distinct yet equally crucial to the men's, ensured the well-being of their entire community. Imagine Pocahontas learning the intricate art of building yehakins, the traditional reed-covered houses. Picture her attending to the crops, carefully planting and harvesting the life-sustaining foods. Envision her skillfully crafting baskets, pots, and mats, her hands transforming natural materials into essential tools and beautiful works of art. One of the most vital skills Pocahontas mastered was the knowledge of edible plants. She learned to identify a vast array of flora, recognizing their uses in different seasons. This deep connection to the land, this intimate understanding of nature's bounty was woven into the very fabric of Powhatan life. By the age of 14, Pocahontas would have reached adulthood in the eyes of her people. She would have begun to adorn herself with the distinctive markings of Powhatan women, tattoos that told stories of her identity and lineage. She would have donned the deerskin apron, and in winter, the warm embrace of a leather mantle, signifying her status as the daughter of a powerful chief. Perhaps she even wore the elegant one-shouldered fringed dresses when greeting visitors. And her hair, once shaved, would now flow freely, styled in intricate braids or worn loose, a symbol of her womanhood. This was Pocahontas on the cusp of a changing world, a world that would soon collide with the arrival of English settlers. There are two types of accounts of the Pocahontas story. One, written by John Smith, an English settler, and an oral story, probably more true. The English settlers arrived in 1607, when Pocahontas would have been 11 years old. Now, John Smith wrote in his journal account that he was captured by the Powhatans and was about to be executed. But as his head was laid on a rock and another rock was about to crush down to execute him, Pocahontas laid her head next to his and saved his life. Most likely, according to oral history, John did not understand that he was participating in an adoption ceremony. In actuality, the Powhatans liked him. Now, Pocahontas being only 11 would not have been in the circle witnessing the event. While Pocahontas may not have saved Smith's life in the way he described, she did play a role in fostering relations between the Powhatan and the settlers. She, along with other Powhatan people, visited the English settlement, bringing food and gifts, helping them to survive those difficult early years. Here I want to make sure that I characterize the Powhatan people correctly. They were not naive, nor innocent. Indians like Pocahontas and her father, the powerful King Powhatan, confronted the vast might of the English with sophistication, diplomacy, and violence when necessary. They were at an advantage in many ways. As I shared, they knew the land. They knew how to cultivate. They knew plants to eat and not to eat. And they were at a disadvantage in others. But as the settlers' supplies dwindled, their friendly demeanor changed. They began making increasing demands on the Powhatan's resources. And when those demands weren't met, they resorted to violence, burning villages and creating a climate of fear. This marked a turning point. Pocahontas, witnessing this betrayal, ceased her visits to the English settlement. The Powhatan oral tradition tells us that around 1610, at the age of 14, Pocahontas married a man named Kocoum from the Potawatomi tribe. Englishman William Strachey described Kocoum as a private captain, suggesting that he held some authority, though not the status of a chief. And this detail hints that Pocahontas may have chosen her husband based on affection, a right afforded to Powhatan women, despite her status as the chief's favorite daughter. Oral history also suggests that they had a child together. Tragedy struck 3 years later. Kocoum was killed, and her child was given to another woman. It appears this was a calculated move, setting the stage for Pocahontas' capture by the English. They used her as a bargaining chip, demanding corn, the return of prisoners, and stolen goods and a peace treaty. While some of these demands were met immediately, others were subject to negotiation. Pocahontas was moved to a settlement near present-day Richmond, Virginia, where she encountered a man named John Rolfe. And here is where the oral tradition diverges sharply from the romanticized narratives. During her year-long captivity, Pocahontas is said to have fallen into deep depression, becoming vulnerable and compliant. And it's within this context that John Rolfe took advantage of her, resulting in a pregnancy. And this fact was concealed, and she was quickly moved back to Jamestown. In fact, Pocahontas was used as a pawn to secure peace. She asked to marry John Rolfe, and with her father's reluctant permission, the marriage took place in 1614. And this union, known as the Peace of Pocahontas, brought a temporary end to the ongoing conflict, and she gave birth to their son Thomas. And soon after, she converted to Christianity. And ironically, she and John Rolfe played a key role in the colony's survival by promoting the cultivation of tobacco. In 1616, Pocahontas, now known as Rebecca Rolfe, journeyed to England with her husband John Rolfe and a retinue of Powhatan men and women. Now let me tell you a little bit about John Rolfe. He was a widower at this time when he met Pocahontas. He was a tobacco planter and a businessman. He was described as a pious and ambitious man, driven by the desire to improve his social and economic standing. His role in introducing tobacco cultivation, as we already said, into Virginia proved very pivotal for the colony's economy, though it also had very devastating long-term consequences for the indigenous population in the land itself. So here they are, sailing to England. The English welcomed Pocahontas as, unfortunately, a civilized savage, a testament to their colonial project. She was presented as an Indian princess, a symbol of successful conversion and assimilation. And she even met King James I and the royal family. A spectacle designed to impress and reinforce English superiority. During her time in England, she also encountered John Smith, whom she had believed to be dead. In a poignant moment, Smith did record in his journals how Pocahontas, now Rebecca, reprimanded him for his treatment of her father and her people, a powerful reminder of the complex and often fraught relationship between the two cultures. Tragically, on the return voyage to the American colonies, Rebecca fell ill, likely with tuberculosis or pneumonia, although I have read that some do think she was poisoned. She died at the young age of 22, and she was buried in Gravesend, England, far away from her own land, her own people. John Rolfe, now a widower again, returned to Virginia, and he left their young son Thomas with relatives in England. Within a year, Chief Powhatan also passed away. The fragile peace, the peace of Pocahontas, began to unravel. Without her presence as a bridge between the two worlds, tensions escalated, and life for the Powhatan people would never be the same. The seeds of conflict sown during those early years of colonization would continue to grow, casting a long shadow over the future of the Powhatan and the English settlers. Now, some of you might be saying to yourself, Sandra, these stories don't sound anything like that beautifully animated Disney movie Pocahontas that my family so enjoyed. No, indeed, they do not. The Disney version of Pocahontas takes significant liberties with both the John Smith account and the Powhatan oral tradition. It romanticizes and simplifies the complex historical events, often creating a narrative that's more palatable for a family audience, but far from accurate. And why would they do that? As often is the case in film, Native Americans are often portrayed in very stereotypical ways. And in this case, the Powhatan culture, their spiritual beliefs, their daily life is simplified and made nearly one-dimensional. And now we know that the ending is no happy ever after with Pocahontas and Smith remaining pen pals. It is much more tragic. In fact, the Disney Pocahontas is fiction. Pocahontas' story is a complex tapestry woven with threads of resilience, manipulation, and ultimately tragedy. It's a story that challenges us to confront the romanticized narratives of history and to acknowledge the enduring legacy of colonization. While I'm not a Native American scholar, I'm not Native American, I believe it's crucial to stand in solidarity with indigenous communities and amplify their voices. By sharing the true stories of women like Pocahontas, we can learn from the past and work towards a more just and equitable future. John Smith's account, likely embellished to impress the English court, obscures the truth of Pocahontas' life and the complexities of Powhatan culture. And John Rolfe, the man who took advantage of her captivity and fathered her child, is hardly a romantic hero. These men, driven by their own ambitions and biases, shaped the narrative to suit their own purposes. But Pocahontas' agency shines through. Even in captivity, she used her silence as a strategy, forcing her captors to listen. She adapted, learning their language, and embraced their customs, not out of submission, but as a means of survival and resistance. Her marriage to Rolfe and the birth of their son Thomas can be seen as a strategic move to forge a connection between her people and the colonizers, a desperate attempt to bridge the divide. Pocahontas' story resonates deeply with the ongoing missing and murdered indigenous people crisis, MMIP, because the tragic reality is that indigenous women and girls face disproportionate rates of violence, often fueled by historical injustices and systemic inequalities. The statistics are staggering and heartbreaking. This crisis is a direct consequence of the devaluing and erasure of indigenous women's lives, a legacy that began with colonization and continues to this day. By acknowledging the truth of Pocahontas' story and the ongoing struggles of indigenous communities, we can begin to dismantle the harmful narratives that perpetuate violence and injustice. We must amplify indigenous voices, support their fight for sovereignty and self-determination, and work together to create a world where all women are valued, respected, and protected. The legacy of Pocahontas and countless other indigenous women must be honored by ensuring that their stories are told with the truth and dignity they deserve. Let's commit to learning from the past, taking action in the present, and building a future where the voices and lives of all people are cherished and protected. Thank you for joining me for another episode of HerStance. I hope you enjoyed learning about Pocahontas as much as I enjoyed sharing her story with you. Please hit subscribe and share this with someone you care about. Get the word out. See you next time.